Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Florida Project Learning Tree Virtual Professional Development Training Experience. We're very glad to have you here with us on Zoom this morning, and we'll get started now. And I just wanted to let everybody know that we are recording this webinar, so I'm going to start the recording now, and we'll go ahead and get started. Can everybody see the welcome screen, the presentation? Okay, fantastic. So my name is Jessica Ireland, and I am the coordinator of Florida Project Learning Tree. I work for the University of Florida School of Forest Resources and Conservation. And again, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. We're going to do our best to avoid a webinar like this. I know we've all been participating in a lot of webinars and online meetings, and we're going to try to make sure that we have lots of opportunities for everybody to engage in different ways, and we'll try to avoid as many technical difficulties as possible, but as you know, those sometimes are hard to avoid, but we're going to do our best. So a quick tutorial on how to use Zoom if you are not familiar. I know, again, a lot of us are. So everyone is muted right now, and that's just to help reduce background noise, but please do not feel like please feel free to unmute yourself and chime in whenever you'd like. You are welcome to participate via that audio feature. And we do ask that after you're finished speaking, you do remute just to reduce the background noise. So we have video on right now, and we're going to keep it on for the intros, but we're going to ask you to turn your videos off when we get into the activities and the presentations. That'll just help avoid or address any bandwidth issues that we might all have. So encourage everybody to please use the chat feature or enter comments or to enter your comments or questions. You click the chat feature at the bottom of your on your Zoom menu, and that'll open the dialog box, and we will respond to chat questions throughout the webinar, and we're going to also have dedicated times for discussion. You can raise your hand if you'd like. This feature is a little clunky, but feel free to use it if you'd like. You have to click on participants, find your name, click on more, and then you can raise your hand that way. View options. You want to be in full screen mode. If you're not, right now I encourage you to click the enter full screen mode button. When we are sharing presentations, you have 3 video layout options that you can use. You can use the active speaker view, which just shows the video of the presenter. You can use a gallery view strip, which shows the presenter and other participants, or the gallery view grid. So you have those different buttons at the top of your video, and that will allow you to change the view of your video. So right now, just wanted to start with a few poll questions. So I'm going to put up some polls, and I'll just ask you to respond to the poll. So first, what best describes your role? And I'll share the results once we get everybody's answer. Okay, so we have, looks like a slight majority of non-formal educators. We have some forestry and natural resource professionals and some K through 8 classroom teachers, so great variety. The next question I would like to ask is, what age level do you typically work with or teach? Okay, so we have a majority says wide range of ages, so not any specific age level. We also have some elementary and high school and adult, so that's great. And then finally, one last question. Do you currently use PLT or other environmental education programs in your classroom or your outreach and education efforts? Okay, so how about a split down the middle? Some, about half do and half don't, but are looking forward to, and we are excited to share some resources with you today. Okay, so next, just wanted to check in and see where everybody's participating from. And so if you go to your Zoom menu and click on View Options and then click on Annotate, you can then select the Draw feature and use an arrow tool to mark on the map where you are participating from today. So again, go to View Options, Annotate, and then Draw. Okay, so we've got, looks like up in the Jacksonville, Fernandina Beach area, Brooksville, Leesburg area, St. Petersburg, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood area, some folks from Tallahassee, and just south of Tallahassee, Wapella County. I see a line through Levy County. Sometimes it's hard to tell exactly where the lines are. Orlando area, Tampa area. So we have quite a wide range here, all the way from the Panhandle to South Florida. So that's wonderful. Okay, so Lisa said she's looking for Zoom options. She's in Tampa. Sorry, couldn't find. You have to go to View Options and then click Annotate. It is a little bit tricky to find sometimes. So, all right, so great, from all over the state, and that's wonderful. Okay, let me now clear the screen. Okay, so I want to take a moment now to introduce our facilitators. We have a wonderful team of facilitators that's been helping with this virtual professional development training, and we certainly would not be able to do this without them. So first, Elise Cassie is the assistant for Florida PLT, and she's also with the UF IFAS School of Forest Resources and Conservation. Dana Sussman is a senior forester with the Florida Forest Service, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and she's also a Florida PLT Steering Committee member. Dawn Perez is an education specialist with the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County. Janet Schnaus is an elementary science specialist with Duval County Public Schools. Karen Johnson is a science academic coach with Shields Middle School, Hillsborough County School District, also a Florida PLT Steering Committee member. Kirsten Brazier is a first grade teacher, a Florida PLT school coordinator, and she's at Crawfordville Elementary School, and she's also a PLT Steering Committee member. Marnie Richards is the environmental education coordinator for the Florida Wildlife Federation. Sue Flack is the recycling education and marketing coordinator, Solid Waste Disposal District, Indian River County. She's also a Florida PLT Steering Committee member. So we have a wonderful team of facilitators here with us today. And again, encourage you to interact with them, ask questions with the chat feature, turn on your microphone and ask a question if you'd like to. And we're gonna have some breakout discussion times where we will be engaging with the facilitators. So I wanted to check in with everybody before we dive into the activities and such. I wanted to see what your expectations are for this training. So if you could use the chat feature to type in what your expectations are. What do you hope to get out of this Florida PLT virtual training? So Julie says class activities and lessons. Melissa, new ideas, more ways to engage youth in nature. Wow, I have to scroll back up. Learning what PLT is about and also some fresh ideas, new ideas, generate more awareness about Earth Day. So hoping to learn some new activities post-COVID and learn new methods for teaching marine-related activities. Looking for ideas to get students interested in nature and protecting it. Nature, new lesson ideas. Activities to take students outside and specifically environmental education toolbox. New ideas and activities and learn skills to connect with a range of ages and nature. So that's wonderful. And we're Project Learning Tree specifically is an environmental education program that uses trees and forests as windows on the world. But all of the activities cover pretty much the full gamut of environmental issues, not necessarily so much on marine science, but there are a lot on water and water related issues. And Melissa said ideas for remote learning. So that's an excellent point. And I do want to encourage everybody to be thinking about, we'll talk about this in some of the breakout discussion rooms, but we're going to be obviously experiencing and modeling activities in a virtual environment today. These activities were originally written and developed for use outside or indoors in a classroom or at a nature center. But be thinking about different ways that the activities could be adapted both for in-person and a virtual environment. So thanks for sharing your expectations. So our objectives today are you're going to experience a virtual tree identification hike. We're going to explore and participate in selected activities from the PLT Pre-K through 8 Environmental Education Activity Guide. We're going to identify strategies and share ideas for incorporating PLT into classrooms and outreach and education programs, and learn about resources and how to stay connected. So we are in the welcome, review agenda, objectives, and intro to PLT. We're going to do an icebreaker, which is a PLT activity called We All Need Trees. And that'll be with Elise Cassie. We'll do a virtual tree identification hike with Dana Sussman. And then we're going to do 3 PLT activities and then have 2 breakout discussions within those times. And so after that, we'll quickly review some educator resources and how to stay connected, and we'll wrap up with instructions on how to access part 2 of the virtual training. So briefly wanted to introduce you to what Project Learning Tree is. Project Learning Tree is an initiative of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, otherwise known as SFI, and we call Project Learning Tree PLT. SFI is an independent nonprofit organization dedicated to the future of forests and promoting sustainable forest management. So through PLT and other outreach and education initiatives, SFI is working to ensure today's youth become effective future leaders with a strong understanding of the value of responsibly managed forests and the importance of sustaining our natural resources. So the goals of Project Learning Tree are to provide students with awareness, appreciation, skills, and commitment to be able to address environmental issues, enable students to apply scientific processes and higher order thinking skills to resolve environmental problems, help students acquire appreciation for and tolerance of diverse viewpoints on environmental issues, develop attitudes and actions, encourage creativity, originality, and flexibility to resolve environmental problems and issues, and to inspire and empower students to become responsible, productive, and participatory members of society. So Project Learning Tree is characterized by 3 equally important components. One is the award-winning instructional materials for pre-K through 12, high-quality professional development for both formal and non-formal educators, and the incredible network that is not only national PLT, but PLT spans into other countries. It's an international program. Every state in the United States has a state-run PLT program. We have a network of facilitators all over the world, like the team that's going to be helping with the training today. You, the educators who bring the programming and the curriculum to the youth and the adults that you work with. So PLT curriculum is multidisciplinary and hands-on. The premise of PLT, like many environmental education programs, is the importance of teaching how to think, not what to think. So PLT is never going to advocate for any particular point of view or perspective on a topic, but instead encourage creative thinking, decision-making, problem-solving around those complex issues. There are lesson plans and activities for ages 3 through grade 12. They can be easily incorporated into existing curriculum or used in informal settings. And 5 of the curriculum guides are aligned to Florida education standards, and I'll provide a little bit more detail on that at the end of the webinar. In Florida, as I mentioned earlier, PLT is sponsored by the UF IFAS School of Forest Resources and Conservation. We have 2 staff members, myself and Elise. We have an incredible steering committee made up of 17 members. We have a statewide network of facilitators, and then we have our educators like you and our network of Florida PLT schools and environmental education centers. So with that, we're going to move into an icebreaker with Elise. We're going to explore the PLT activity, We All Need Trees.
Hopefully everybody brought their favorite tree product with them. And what we'd like to do is for you to share. We'll have time for roughly 10, but we'll see how many we can see. And so what I'd like you to do is, instead of using the raise hand feature in Zoom, I think it may be good if you just raise your hand, like actually physically raise your hand. I think that's going to be the easiest. And Jessica, if you can help me out because my view is a little funny. With that, oops, wrong one. So we'd like you to share can you see Jessica?
Melissa Stevens has her hand raised. So
okay,
Melissa,
great. So Melissa, can you please share your tree product and why it's your favorite?
Well, my favorites are my soup ladle that my grandfather made and my chocolate stir, which my dad made. And they have made many wonderful things in the kitchen.
Wow, that's great. That's wonderful.
And I think I saw a hand from Julie. Julie, you need to unmute.
So mine is a piece of artwork from a student, and she painted on a piece of cardboard that was being thrown away.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
And then gave that to me. So that's my favorite thing in my house.
Thank you.
That's great.
Okay, anybody else?
Okay, I see Janet Carell.
Janet, are you there?
There you go.
Yes. My favorite is shampoo. I like the smells and things that are in them that come from trees. This one is argan oil. So nuts and things. So
great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, anybody else? Because we do have time for a few more.
Let's see, looks like, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Shirish?
Yep, my favorite is my meditation stool. I just got it. It's a bamboo meditation stool.
That's great.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Something I need.
I'm trying to scroll through everybody. Sorry if I'm missing. I think I saw, let's see, Elizabeth.
My favorite is ginkgo biloba tea. I drink it typically on the regular. It's good for you.
Great. So I think we'll, in the interest of time, we'll move on. But if you didn't get a chance to share now, you will have a chance at least to share in a different way in a few minutes. So thank you so much for bringing your favorite products. Okay, so question for you. What does a pencil, a cinnamon stick, and a sponge have in common? And you can just unmute and shout it out. I'm fine with that. We'll see how that works. So a pencil, a cinnamon stick, and a sponge. And if you're not sure, they all come from trees. So they're all tree products, either an actual tree product like a cinnamon stick is dried bark, or a sponge that has a tree component in it. And then a fun fact is there are over 5,000 products made from trees. So we really do use tree products every day, even though we may not know it. If you look at a shampoo bottle, for instance, it gives you an example. So again, this activity is We All Need Trees. And there are two primary objectives. And Jessica, if you can put up that objective slide, that would be great. So students will examine different products and determine which products are made from trees. And then students will describe ways trees are used to make the products and ways products can be conserved. And that you can almost break those up into younger students and older students if you want to go into more depth with older students. But this activity this morning, we're going to focus on the younger version. So a K through 12, even preschool could do this. And the activity provides opportunities for classifying and categorizing, and for older elementary students, group work, research and writing opportunities, and also some evaluation practice that certainly young students can participate in as well. So here's your opportunity if you didn't get to share your product that we're all going to share now. And what we're going to do is we're going to experience categorizing our favorite tree product. We're going to use 3 simple categories for today. And we're going to use our whiteboard feature. So how you're going to do this is you're going to go to View Options and click the Annotate button, which brings up tools. And in this instance, we're going to use our text tool. And if you can put your product that you brought or your favorite product, if you didn't bring it in and you have another one, that's fine. But if you could write it up under the category that you think your product is in, please do that now. And if you have any problems with that, just let us know. And we can also help to move those. Actually, Jessica, you can do that, right? All right, so let's see what we have. We have shampoo, maple syrup, yum, okay. Cutting board. Okay, somebody put up olive. I'm assuming that would be the kind that you eat, so we would put that under food. Unless that's all one word, I'm not really sure, but okay, great. A notebook and a book under paper. Maple syrup, shredded cheese, that's right. So someone knows a lot about tree products already, I see. Okay, great. Rocking chair, ukulele. Wonderful. So these are simple categories that you can use with students, and that also can be expanded as well. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. Okay. So this activity actually has 2 parts, and you can do them together, or they can be, you don't have to do part A and part B, but there's 2 parts. And so the first part for this activity is tree detectives. You just experienced that, and that involves classifying products into groups. And you can use pictures or actual products, depending if you're doing it virtually or not. And that's something I do want to point out, where we're trying to provide activities here that can be used both in person and virtually. So we've adapted them the best that we can virtually, and I think you'll find that they would be effective both ways. So let's see. All right, so now if you, Jessica, could put up the slide with the goods from the woods activity. I wanted to show you, so the chart from the left is for, yes, from the book, and it does have expanded products. So you'll see bark, and it lists bark and sap products, cellulose products as well. So as students get older, you can expand and refine the categories depending on what your needs are and what your students' level is. You'll soon find out cellulose, if you don't know, is a product that is a tree product that's in so many different products that we use. So, and it is a component of plant cell walls and provides structure. So it's something that we just see in so many different products. And then the chart to the right is goods from the woods, and it's examples of other products that you may not have even realized. And that both of these charts can be used for research if students want to choose, or you want to assign them and then explain what from trees to product, how they're made. So the second part is part B, and that's tree treasures. It involves dividing students into teams of 4. They work together to determine which products are made from trees or have ingredients from trees. All the team members have to agree if a product is to be put on their tree product list. And once their lists are complete, you can give each team a set of 4 short tree readings. And if you could just put that up too, Jessica, that would be great. I'm just going to show you, they are short, but what they do is provide information that can help the students further evaluate if a product should be on their list or not. One of them is about paper, another one talks a little bit about cellulose. And so it gives them a chance to reevaluate their list. So I think we have time for our video clips this morning. We have 2 short video clips that I felt was important to show. One is from a Georgia sawmill, just sort of the scope of how large the lumber industry is, and you can see that. And then there's going to be another one that talks a little bit about a specific tree product. So we'll show those. They're fairly short, but hope you'll enjoy those. Okay.
We've seen trees grow and we've seen trees cut down, but what happens to the tree after it hits the mill is just the start of its next journey. This is fantastic. I feel like sensory overload. The smell is wonderful. Where are we right now?
Well, we're in the log yard portion of the sawmill in Perry, Georgia. Every species has their own smell. You know, some people love the smell of southern yellow pine. Almost everybody loves.
Okay, I'm getting some comments that the video is pretty choppy, so I'm going to ask everybody to please go ahead and turn off your video right now. That might help address some of the bandwidth issues, and then we'll try to get started with the video again.
Okay. If it doesn't work, we'll say, but let's hopefully that'll make a difference. All right.
The smell of cedar, but all sawmills typically smell pretty good if you like the smell of wood.
What do you guys do here?
So our main job here is to safely convert logs into lumber to be sold for end use with the customer.
So when I see logs going down the highway on a huge truck, is it coming here?
They're all coming here, hopefully all the good ones.
And then what happens?
So as you can see behind us, the logs will show up in trucks. They'll be weighed at a scale. Once they get into the log yard behind us, they'll be unloaded, put into the crane pile. After a couple of days, they'll be loaded into the mill and processed into lumber.
About how many shipments do you guys get in a day?
We run about 75 semi-trucks full of logs each day.
Is the video still problematic for some people? I'm getting some comments that it is. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll just skip the videos. I'm going to be providing you with links to all of this after the training, so we can just have everybody watch after the training. Okay. Well, look, some people it's working and some people it's not working. So maybe finish this one video, Elise, and then we'll just skip the second one.
Yeah, that's fine. And if it's just not working, I mean, it has to, I just wanted to be.
Well, I think it's just some people have some bandwidth issues, but others it's okay. So we'll just go ahead and finish this one out.
Okay, sure.
That is a lot of trees.
Most of these logs come from land owned privately versus land owned by the government. All of these logs come within a 100-mile radius of this plant site. There's such a plentiful supply of logs all throughout Georgia that we don't have to travel long distances to bring them back.
And then when you have the finished product, where does it go after that?
There's a number of uses for our finished product. Some goes into fence building, some goes into making pallets, some is for building trusses and doors and walls inside houses. And each type of wood, every piece is graded so we know where that piece could be used.
So your products go through testing and receive grades kind of like us.
That's right. Once it's graded, it'll get banded, it'll get strapped, we'll put a package on it, and it'll be ready for shipment to the customer.
And all of that happens right here in the lumber yard?
All of the product gets made here and shipped from here. So if you're out in your yard looking at your fence or even looking at your home, there's a very good chance, being one of the largest lumber producers in the region, that wood came from Interfor. Owned by the government.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Well, Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
You can, okay, all right. All right, great. All right, so hopefully you got something from that. I think Melissa had mentioned it's incredible to see the volume of trees we cut down. It is, and it can be kind of overwhelming until you realize that more and more private companies are sustainably managing their forests to a great extent. So it's you know, taking a renewable resource and managing it sustainably. We certainly can have plenty of trees, so that's a good thing. Okay, let me take hang on just a second here. Okay, so there's 2 additional suggestions under the activities and enrichment section, and all of the pre-K through 8 activities do have this section. I like to call them extension activities because they are, in a sense, extensions of what you would do in the other parts of the activity. The first one is make a treasure tree, and you can do this as a class activity, and certainly you can do it virtually as well. But the class can make a treasure tree with either a dead branch or a reused Christmas tree. After Christmas, bring that old Christmas tree in, and students can hang tree products on the branches. And so you can have a treasure tree that way, or you can have a student made, students can make individual ones, as you can see here. And so the student one is not in the activity, but I had a little time on my hands and I thought this would be a good thing to do with students, trying to think about the best way to engage students in this activity. So you can see it's really simple to make, you know, hard cardboard base and paper towel roll, either glued or taped on. And certainly if your students are creative, they can actually decorate them and paint them. But another way to get students to think about products they use every day, and maybe another research opportunity as well. And let's see, we do have that's for the next one, but we do have a list of products that were on that other, the more elaborate treasure tree. So you can see those products as well in a little description. And so finally, we have another enrichment activity, and we call it Find the Mystery Product. We facilitators, PLT facilitators, like to use this as an icebreaker. It's a whole lot of fun for adults, as you can see, but it's also really fun for students, where you take a product and you tape it onto the back of a student. They don't know what it is. And it's a variation on 20 questions where you so students ask each person 2 yes or no questions, and then they must move on to the next person until they discover their tree product. The cards that will be available to you, they have a description on the back as well, so you can read a little bit more about them. That is the end of this activity, but many of these resources will be available to you, and you are more than welcome to ask us any questions that you want, you know, after this training. And do you have any questions specifically about We All Need Trees before we move on? You'll see the product cards up that you can download.
Thanks a lot, Elise. And so as Elise mentioned, be sending you lots of resources related to the activities you'll be experiencing today. So these tree product cards will be provided to you, instructions on how to make the tree treasure, and all of those resources. I did want to follow up on, there was some questions early on about the sponge, and the fact that sponges are natural sponges are not from trees, and that is a very good point. And so a lot of times it is important when we're talking about tree products and things that come from trees, especially some things that we wouldn't necessarily think comes from trees, are things that are often going to be chemically produced from tree products, such as cellulose or resin or sap or something like that. So it is important to make that clarification, that would, you know, oftentimes things are naturally come from one source in a natural way, but coming from a tree product are produced chemically from a different byproduct of the tree. So
Right. I did want to mention one other thing about somebody put up Parmesan cheese, and that's a good point, is that shredded and grated cheese oftentimes does have cellulose powder in it, which prevents caking. So, and again, not all shredded and grated cheese has it, but if you look at the ingredients list, you'll see that cellulose powder in shredded or grated cheese. So yes. Thank you for clarifying that.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Elise. And so this is the activity We All Need Trees from the guide. It's activity 13. And so it's a great activity. I think as Karen mentioned, the readings to discover things, if you're working with older students, you can engage them in actually doing research on their own tree products and bringing that back. So there's lots of different ways with all PLT activities to adapt and modify for your specific context and audience. So with that, we're lucky enough to have an opportunity today to go on a virtual tree ID hike at the UCF Arboretum. And so Dana Sussman with the Florida Forest Service is going to lead us on this hike. Dana, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the professional development training with Project Learning Tree. My name is Dana Sussman, and I'm a senior forester with the Florida Forest Service. And just briefly, the Florida Forest Service, my role with them is the final category at the bottom, community and landowner education, just working with anyone who owns property or would like to learn about forest management. But we are a multiple mission agency. So today we're going to visit the University of Central Florida Arboretum. I work in the Orlando district, and the University of Central Florida is nearby, and they have a wonderful arboretum that is open to the general public from sunrise to sunset every day. Arboretums in general focus on trees, and the UCF Arboretum specifically is to provide opportunities for students, staff, and visitors to explore and learn about Florida's diverse ecosystems and the plant life they support. So a couple notable arboretums, the Morton Arboretum near Chicago, the U.S. National Arboretum in Washington, D.C., and then botanical gardens are sort of a subset of arboretums with both trees and plants that might be used in the landscape. So in your area, there probably is some type of arboretum or botanical garden that you would be able to visit. The UCF Arboretum not only has a portion where it's a little more formal with paths to view individual trees, but they also have quite a rich diversity of ecosystems, which show flora and fauna native to Florida. It's also a type of outdoor laboratory because they do actively manage it for natural resources and use both college students and volunteers to do that. So there are 8 distinct ecosystems at the Arboretum. We're going to focus on the first 4, scrubby flatwoods, scrub, mesic flatwoods, and wet flatwoods. So the Arboretum is about 800 acres on the east side of the University of Central Florida campus. And you can see from the legend and the different colored lines that there's many trails that you can take through the Arboretum. And if you can read these small words, these describe the different ecosystem and habitats that are in the UCF Arboretum. So during our virtual visit, we're going to focus on learning to identify a few trees native to Florida, which we would be able to find at the UCF Arboretum. And all the photos you see were taken during a couple walks that I made at the Arboretum. And we'll talk just a little bit about the complexity of those ecosystems and the rich diversity that you would find in them. So I mentioned we're going to focus on 4 different ecosystems: the scrubby flatwoods, scrub, mesic flatwoods, and mesic means not wet, not dry, kind of in the middle. And then we also will look at wet flatwoods. And again, all these photos were taken along the trail at the UCF Arboretum. So during our virtual visit, we can sit back in air-conditioned comfort. If we were taking a real walk, these are a few of the things you would need, you know, your hiking boots, water, insect repellent, sunscreen, and a hat. But today we're just going to bring our imagination and begin by taking our virtual walk along the trail. So if you look at the map, you see there's now some letters, A through E, that appear. Those are going to be our nature trail stops. And we're going to start at the pavilion, which is right here and is close to the roadway and parking. So the Timothy R. Newman Nature Pavilion is a wonderful place to start, and most arboretums do have a public sitting area where you could have your lunch or rest in the shade or meet as a group at the beginning. So that's going to be the starting point for our nature walk. When you take a nature walk, sometimes you go unencumbered except for, you know, bringing water and sunscreen and insect repellent, but other times you want to bring a nature journal, maybe a camera. You might want to collect leaves. For our virtual tour, leaf collecting might be in the form of doing some tracings or making origami leaves, or some way of drawing your leaves and putting them in your nature journal. Before you start your hike, you might want to look at some of the PLT activities that are compatible with a nature walk. And I've listed 3 here: sounds around, poetry, and name that tree. And the diagram that you see here, this is a poem template called the Diamante poem that is part of poetry and can be a wonderful way to get your students thinking about the different aspects of a particular item. It also introduces or reintroduces them to parts of the English language, nouns, participles, and it's a fun thing to do, and also really cool to hear what everybody writes when they're all done. We will come back to this slide at the very end, so if you didn't get the number of the PLT activities down now, you'll have a chance at the end. So as we go through the Arboretum, we see a lot of different trees, but sometimes we want to know specifically what type of tree is that. So how do we identify a tree? Dendrology is the science of tree identification and uses a list of identifying characteristics to help identify the specific scientific name for a tree. And every tree type has a specific scientific name. This IFAS University of Florida publication here is a very good one for going through the different characteristics used in tree identification. You may have seen a key for doing identification, not only for trees, but other living things. And most of the time, those keys are what are called dichotomous, where you have 2 answers, and depending on which answer you choose, that then moves you further through the identification guide. So when we're talking about trees, we also have a lot of yes or no questions. The leaf arrangement is used commonly. And there's opposite, if you see these leaves come off the same node on the branch, and alternate, where they go back and forth along the branch. The leaf type is either broad, this is a hickory, or needle-like. The pines tend to, or pines are a good example of needle-like. Bark can be really distinctive on certain types of trees. The bark you see here is from a persimmon. Sometimes this is called alligator bark just because of the amazing texture that it has. And oftentimes a certain type of tree, you see the bark, you see the trunk, and you know immediately what it is. Other times there's similarities within the same genus with the bark, and you have to look more closely to know specifically what type of tree it is. Flowers and fruits can range from large and showy to very small and indistinctive. And what you find is that, again, you may see the flower or fruit and know immediately what kind of tree that is, or at least what genus it is. These come from maples, so you would know this was some kind of maple tree. I mentioned leaf arrangement, the opposite, where the 2 leaves come out of the same node, or alternate, where you see that they are kind of going back and forth out of the branch on the tree. Opposite, only a few broadleaf trees have opposite leaf arrangement. So if you find that, you know that your list of possibilities is fairly short. Some of the common ones that have opposite leaf arrangement are maples, ash, and dogwoods, all which do grow in Florida. We will see maple during our walk today. Most broadleaf trees are alternate leaf arrangement, and we'll see two of those today, sweet gum and loblolly bay. The leaf type, broad leaves, most hardwoods are broad leaves, oaks, maples, hickories, and almost all broadleaf trees are deciduous. Needle-like leaves tend to be softwoods. We saw the wood yard with all the pines, that would be a softwood, and they're used a lot for lumber, paper, a lot of cellulose in them. And spruces and firs, which we really don't see at all in Florida, but if you venture north and west, you would see them. And most trees with needle-like leaves are evergreen. Sometimes you need to look at the leaf parts. Maybe you've determined it's a broadleaf, but then you need to look closer at that leaf. And this is a diagram of some of the more common parts of the leaf: the petiole or the stem, the way it's attached to the branch, the veins, the midrib off which the veins come, the margin or the leaf edge, the tip, and then the lamina, which is what's in between the veins, not very commonly used to identify a tree, but sometimes. You'll see here, this petiole or stem is red, and that's a specific characteristic of red maple. So again, the leaf parts can help you identify the tree. So our first stop after the nature pavilion is going to be up here at B, and you see that we could get there either via the Orange Trail this way or this way, and notice that there's a lot of different ecosystems that we're walking by, whichever way we get to point B. And we arrive at the scrubby flatwoods. We know just from study that longleaf pine and slash pine are commonly found in scrubby flatwoods, but how are we going to know the difference between longleaf pine and slash pine when we're doing our identification? We see that what they have in common is that their leaf type is needle-like, and a lot of needles, long needles. If you look at the bundle on the left here, you see that there are 3 needles in what's called a fascicle or bundle. If we look up here, we see that not only are there bundles of 3, but there are also bundles of 2. And that's going to help us identify which of these is longleaf pine and which of these is slash pine. On longleaf, we would find bundles of 3 only. Slash pine, we would find both bundles of 2 and bundles of 3, or fascicles of 2, fascicles of 3. Young pines can be distinctive, and we may be in an area where there are not a lot of mature trees, and we need to know how to identify young or juvenile trees. Longleaf pine on the left is very unique. When it's first sprouts, it looks like a clump of grass. As it gets a little bigger, it really doesn't have much branch structure. It's almost like a post that needles are growing from. Slash pine on the right can look like a miniature tree. See, the branches have already started to form, and you have needles along all of those branches. So sometimes younger trees can be all we have to look at and identify the type of tree. Also in the scrubby flatwoods, we might find sand live oak and live oak. And if you look at the leaves in the center, they look different, but we need to know a little bit more about each type of leaf before we can say specifically, is it sand live oak and live oak? From the overall pictures of the trees, they look pretty similar from a distance. So we know that the leaf type is broad. We're going to use the leaf margin here to help us. And there's a term called revolute, which means the edge of the margin is actually started to, the edge of the leaf or the margin is actually turning under. That happens a little bit on these leaves, but you can see it happens even more pronounced on these leaves. So that's going to help us know that the tree on the left, those leaves come from a sand live oak, and the tree on the right is from a live oak. So we've been to the scrubby flatwoods, and now we're going to go up here into the scrub. And just like it sounds, the trees in the scrub have a certain beauty, but may not be as majestic as you might find in other parts, other types of ecosystems. we notice that on our list of trees we might find in the scrub, there's a repeat from the scrubby flatwoods, sand live oak, and some trees have a wide range of site conditions in which they grow. We begin to notice the soil here is very, very dry. The scrub plants, trees are able to survive without a lot of soil moisture. What we might find in the scrub is a pine, but a little different than longleaf and slash pine. See in the picture on the right, the needles to the right, the fascicle is bundles of 2. They're much shorter than longleaf and slash pine. The tree itself is said not as majestic as longleaf and slash. Oftentimes sandpine are used as Christmas trees. They're Christmas tree farms, and they're sheared and they can be coaxed into a Christmas tree shape. And then you'll see the needles on the left are short fascicles of 2. So sandpine can tolerate the drier conditions that you find in the scrub. We looked at sand live oak in the previous ecosystem. And again, just a reminder that sometimes you're going to have to look at the leaf margin to make that final identification of what type of tree it is. If you know something about tree identification, you see that there are acorns, so you may know this is an oak, but you might want to know specifically what type of oak it is. 2 other oaks we might see in the scrub are myrtle oak and Chapman oak. They look very similar from a distance, but as we move closer, we see that the myrtle oak, the leaves tend to be fairly flat, and the Chapman oak, they seem to kind of curl under just a little bit. Not the leaf margins themselves necessarily, but the entire leaf. So again, looking closer, you'd be able to tell the difference. But sometimes it's hard, and trees have what are called juvenile leaves when they're young that may be larger or a little bit differently shaped than their mature leaves. So having a tree guide with you can help you positively know that you've correctly identified the tree. Soft palmetto isn't a tree. It's actually a monocot or a grass because it just has one bud that it produces at the same time. It has a very wide range of growing conditions it can tolerate. It's found throughout the Arboretum, anywhere from the scrubby flatwoods to our mesic and wet flatwoods. It's very important in natural resource management because it's a rare plant that's flammable when it's green, but it is very important in those fire-dependent ecosystems. Xerocamic, I just wanted to show you that a little bit of elevation difference can provide a shade haven from the scrub. Here we just probably have a little indentation, a little depression, a hammock where there's some more soil moisture. We see the leaves are hanging around longer because there's more shade, and this would be a wonderful area on your walk to take a break in the shade. So we've now left the scrub and we're walking along the Blue Trail into the mesic flatwoods. And our list of trees we might find includes 2 we've seen before, slash pine and soft palmetto. And you can see that the mesic flatwoods just have more ground cover. There's more soil moisture. We're going to see maybe a little bit more height to some of our plants because there is more soil moisture. Loblolly Bay is one of the more common trees you find in the mesic flatwoods, a showy flower, gorgeous bloom. When we were looking at leaf parts, we mentioned the midrib. You can see how distinct and prominent the midrib is in Loblolly Bay. This weird little red blob on the photo is actually a leaf. Loblolly Bay has a unique characteristic in that a few leaves on a tree will be a reddish to purple color. You can see that beginning to happen on this branch. Carolina cherry laurel would also be found in the mesic flatwoods, and it's a broadleaf tree that is evergreen. It has a distinctive looking bark. We talked about that earlier, where you may see the bark, and that's going to be the final characteristic that helps you positively identify the tree. These, I don't know how well you can see that, but those are actually the flowers, and compared to the Loblolly Bay, much less distinctive. but still important in the life cycle of the tree. So finally, we've left the mesic flatwoods and we're moving into the wet flatwoods. During the summertime, parts of this trail might be underwater, but for the most part, the Arboretum is open and accessible, all the trails year round. So in the wet flatwoods, again, a little bit of overlap. We might find Loblolly Bay here. We might start to see some ferns or some indicators of wetter sites, a little bit more shade. So our trail is going to have more leaves on it, less open soil. And we're going to see these, look closely at a few of these trees here. The cypress, bald cypress, is unique in that it is a tree with needle-like leaves that's deciduous, not evergreen. It can grow in standing water, but it can also do quite well in a drier area. You see the distinct needles and the globular fruit. Pond pine is the fourth pine we've seen today after longleaf, slash, and sand pine. It has fascicles of 3 like sand pine, but these needles are going to be a little bit longer. The cones are what we call persistent, which means they would stay on a tree for 2, 3, 4 years. The bark, grayish, again, might help us identify this tree. And then very unique is what's called adventitious sprouting, where the needles are almost growing, or they actually are growing out of either the trunk or the branch without having a smaller branch support them. And we do find this in the wetter sites. Again, reminders about the leaf parts. The petiole, we talked about red maple having this distinct red petiole, and the leaf margin. You may see here that there's little, it's almost serrated. This leaf margin is what's called lobed, where the leaf itself is almost looking more like a hand with fingers. And these are going to help us identify 2 of our final trees that we're seeing in the wet flatwoods. The leaf arrangement, again, you see here opposite, alternate. And the leaf type, both are broad, but we've got an opposite here and an alternate leaf arrangement here. And that's what's going to help us know that this is red maple and this is sweet gum. Now I talked about juvenile leaves sometimes fooling us a little bit. If you can see these mature leaves, maple, that the lobes are much more distinct, similar looking to a mature sweet gum leaf. But when it's smaller, they're not nearly so distinct when it's a younger tree. But that's where the red petiole would help us make the positive identification. We haven't talked much about fruits, but if anyone has a sweet gum tree in their yard and has stepped on one of these little seed pods in their bare feet, you'll never forget what the fruit seed pod is like for a sweet gum tree. I talked about leaf collecting is often a really fun and neat thing to do when you're out on a hike. I'm this person where I pick up every leaf that looks interesting, but if you're doing a virtual hike, you may have to do leaf origami, leaf tracings. Maybe you have some leaves that you saved from a previous hike and you flatten them, or just leaf tracings, anything to add to your nature journal. So we're going to walk back now. This trail here there's a wonderful lake, a high trail, so this would be accessible year round, back to the pavilion. And we might have a chance to write in our nature journal the experiences that we had, maybe the sounds we heard, smells, sights. We might be ready to write a poem or move on to name that tree activity. Just a chance to catch your breath, drink some water. This was my poetry, and I'm not sure, Jessica, if we have time for questions or any came up in the chat room, but either way, I can email answers to people after the training is completed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana. That was wonderful. I hope everybody enjoyed a virtual tree hike. Given how hot it is outside, maybe a virtual option is better today anyway. And so, yeah, are there any questions for Dana? As I mentioned in the chat, Dana has been generous enough to provide us with a PDF of her tree ID hike. And so that's wonderful. I will share that with you after the training. Janet asked, where is the Arboretum located? It's the UCF Arboretum, but maybe Dana can provide a more specific.
It's on the east side of campus. So if you approach from the south off of the 408, you'll eventually hit Gemini, I think it's Gemini Parkway. And as you work your way north along there, you'll see it. It's just south of the softball fields. So on the east side of campus. And like I say, open to the general public. The biggest challenge when school is in session is finding parking. But when school is not in session, that's usually not a challenge, although you probably have to pay a $5 parking fee. It's worth it.
Yeah. And so Dana is the forester in the Orlando area, Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties, I believe. And there are county foresters in every county in Florida. And so we will also provide you with a link to the Florida Forest Service website where you can look up the contact information for your county forester. They're a wonderful resource for bringing to your school or your program. And so we'll provide you with that information. So thank you so much, Dana. And now we're going to dive right into experiencing 3 PLT activities. And if anybody is feeling a little bit tired, maybe just take a moment right now to stand up and stretch like a tree, you know, like you're reaching for the sun. Do a little bit of stretching. We're going to get started with these activities. So again, feel free to ask questions or share ideas via the chat feature. After we finish the first activity, which we're going to do is Water Wonders, we are going to go out into breakout discussion rooms. So we will have some time to think in more detail about both the We All Need Trees and Water Wonders activities, how we might adopt them for our specific context and audiences. But in the meantime, also, again, feel free to use that chat feature. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marnie Richards and Janet Schnaus to lead us through Water Wonders.
So we are going to be presenting Waterworks today. This is activity 44 in the guide, and we are going to dive right into it. So Marnie, if you can click to the next slide. When you're doing this activity, and this is one that we want to do as a group, or you guys could do individually at home. So if you have the materials that were sent out earlier, your dice, your copy of the water cycle scorecard, your pre-made cards, if you have all those with you, just have them sitting aside. We are going to jump into it just a second. Marty, if you can, thank you. So when I'm teaching this, and I'm coming to you, I used to be a middle school teacher. I've taught a little bit of high school, but right now I'm an elementary science specialist. So my focus is on elementary and of course, 5th grade, getting ready for that state science exam. But before you do this activity, there are things that the students need to know. They need to be aware of the steps of the water cycle and the vocabulary that would be a part of it: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, runoff. They also need to understand how water changes states. So they need to know what is a solid, liquid, and gas, and that's part of our tested standards, of course, but understanding, you know, what's happening when you apply heat. You're going to go from a solid to a liquid, more heat, liquid to gas, so understanding the basics. And then I think probably for me the most important part when I taught this was making sure the students understood what those basic reservoirs were. They need to know what a cloud is, what a glacier, ocean, stream. Most of them are going to be familiar with it. They might not know what groundwater is, so that might be the one that needs more explanation. Next slide, Marnie. And one thing I did with my students, and especially if you're doing this with older students, your middle school, high school, you want to kind of go over the distribution of Earth's water with them. So if you look at the green column, that's Earth's water altogether, where 3% of our water on Earth is fresh. The middle column is showing the breakdown of the fresh water, where only 0.3% is surface water. And then we see the breakdown of the surface water. So again, kind of important as we're going through the water cycle activity. Next slide. And so here we've got a slide. When I did this in the classroom, I would always show the water cycle steps and talk about what's happening. For example, I've got the ocean water. When the water heats up, it turns into a gas. That's evaporation. Over time, the particles are going to condense or come together as it's cooling down and form those clouds over time. Enough of those drops come together and it's precipitation. It gets heavy enough, it falls back down. And then we'd either have runoff runoff where it's going back into the rivers, or infiltration that's going to lead to groundwater. So again, kind of getting that visual for the students is important before they do this activity. Next slide. And what we wanted to do now is in the chat box, we're coming from different levels. Some of you guys are coming from elementary, but some of us are coming from outside the classroom, informal educators, or different grade levels. But what are some strategies that you've used when teaching the water cycle? If you could add those to the comment box, please. We just want to take a minute and kind of see what are some strategies that we've used that have been successful. We're going to give you just a second to type those in.
There we go.
I see for high school, brief review, then creating the poster because they already know that. I love the songs, Elizabeth, too. That's excellent. I use that a lot in the elementary level to help them remember. Drop in the bucket activity, like that one, Kim. Journey of the Raindrop is, I've seen that one, Janet, and I've used both. I like this one and I've used this one, but very similar. And Marianne, excellent. Pretending to be a drop of water traveling across the world. That really is kind of the heart of this, maybe not traveling across the world. I like that because you can add that writing piece in there. Very nice. So we've got some good strategies that we could use, but let's look at how Project Learning Tree looks at this activity. So Marnie, next slide. And what I want to do is look, before we look at just it's a short little video clip, let's look at the students on the right-hand side, and you can see that they're at a station. There's a card up there telling where they're at. I think they're at groundwater, and then they would have dice at that station, so they'd roll dice, and it's going to help them walk around. Marnie's going to explain in more detail how to do this activity, but we're going to watch a quick little video clip. This is a first grade classroom, so just so we can see what it would look like in first grade, and we can see students are all over the place. So that was just really quickly. You can see here, first graders, they're able to do it independently. They're moving station to station. Some things I do differently. I wouldn't have those stools up there. I'd have them down for safety. But as the kids get older, they're able to do this independently, and it's really fun, and it's kind of awesome to see what they find out. But now we are going to talk about how we're going to play the game. So Marnie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. There's two different ways you can play the activity with us today. If you have all the materials available, like if you've got the station cards cut out and you've got your scorecard and you have some dice, then you can set up, and as we start the activity, you can kind of play at your own time, and we'll give you a sense of how the time is. If you don't have those all available, then we'll have the stations up on the screen in a larger format, and we'll roll the dice and I'll announce the roll, and then you can move along with us as a group. You will need a scorecard. So if you have that scorecard, if you go ahead and pull it out now, and if not, if you can take a sec to get a piece of paper and a pencil, pen, because that's the way that you're going to be able to track your journey as a water molecule through the water cycle. If you have the cards and you've cut them apart, or maybe you've made cards on your own, you might want to lay them around your space now, kind of set them apart, so you get the sense, like you saw the kids in the video, of moving around from station to station. The cards that we saw in the little side clip just had words on them, but you might make them with pictures, and these are available as PLT resources also. Okay, so the example that we'll show here and would be, if example you were, say you're starting at cloud. Everybody will start in a different place, and you kind of put small groups around at different stations just to have a better traffic flow, and also have some different sets of dice at the station. So each individual can come up, they can roll their dice, they can then make it their own particular journey through the cycle. But let's say you had chosen, or you were going to start at the actual cloud station. So you jot that down. And the first roll was a 2. And what happens then at a 2 would be you fall as rain onto the ocean. Okay. So you jot that down, and you can shorten up though what happens because some of them are kind of lengthy. And then you go to ocean. So jot down ocean. Then you'd walk over or trot over to the ocean station, wherever that's located around your space. And there you'd start your next round. Throw the dice again and see what happens there. Okay. So I'm going to put up the larger slides now, and we'll have this showing while we move through the stations. But I want to know if there's any questions before we get started. And I don't, let's see, let me see, I'll get a grid. Okay, I don't see anything. Okay, we'll play for just a few minutes. So we'll go through several stations. We probably won't make it through all 10, but you'll have enough to get a sense of how it works, and you get through several stations. Okay, so choose your place where you're going to start. You might move to that spot, or you might just pick this spot, and we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll do us a time. All right, so I'm going to roll the first dice, and the roll is 2. So moving around to where 2 would take you, jot that down, or looking at that. Okay. All right, going to move again, and the next roll, it's a 4. So moving to your next station, what happens there, jotting that down. Next roll is a 1. And again, if you're at home and you're rolling your dice, you can just move around at your own rate. Roll is a 2. Jotting that down. Okay, roll again. Okay, this roll is a 5. Roll again. Oh, it's another 5. Roll 6. The roll is a 1. We'll do one more roll. It's a 3. So jot that down. All right. So take a minute, look over your scorecard, and in the chat box, you might share anything particular about your journey. Did you end up in a place more than once? If so, where was that? And Janet, with my screen sharing, for some reason, I'm not able to see the chat box. So do you want to?
That's okay. In fact, I was just coming off of mute so I could share that. So one thing Karen brought up is their concern of dice flying around. I've never had that problem, no matter what grade level. The kids have been really good, but some of my classes have been tougher, and I might have to guide them a little bit to a point that I'd be like, okay, walk to your station. Okay, now roll your dice. Okay, now write down what you see. I might have had to guide that. Others, my higher entire well-behaved classes. I was able to let them go with no problem. And you saw the first grade, they were able to do that. I also see that we had Janet that was in clouds quite a bit. Marianne was in oceans. Kim, lots of clouds and a little bit of glacier time too. So I would get my kids to think about this. What is it about clouds or the ocean or even the glaciers? What did we learn from that first slide where we were looking at where the freshwater was at? I might pull that back up. So what do you think, Marnie? I'm seeing more ocean time.
Right.
Definitely more ocean. A lot of people in the ocean. Another Marianne in the ocean. So lots of people been in the ocean.
Like you said, that's a good thing to bring up with the kids and let them think about why would you spend so much time in a particular place or reservoir.
Yes. And Laura just brought up, I spend a lot of time in the ocean too, wonder why, 70% maybe, absolutely, kind of getting back to that point, where is most of the water on Earth? In the ocean.
All right. So there's, like in all the PLT activities, in your guide, there will be connections to language arts or to reading. And one of the examples that is shown in the guide for a language arts connection is a suggestion to have your students write about their journey as a water molecule. And this is actually an activity that's in our Water Wonders, under the Water Wonders activity. And I've condensed it a little bit. So the student might write up the different spots where they appeared and where they moved to, and then just write a little story about that would, their expression of where they went. Okay. Another activity that Janet will talk about
is the ELA reading connections. So as you can see, as I'm talking, you're going to see different books popping up. One of the things that really engaged my students were, especially when I went down to elementary and I was not just teaching science, I had other subjects I was teaching, was to bring in that literacy piece. My students would come in the morning, they wanted to read. Magic School Bus was probably one of their favorites. So, I'd have them sneaking that out during math time and trying to read more about Magic School Bus and science. Drops in the Ocean, one of my favorites. Did a Dinosaur Drink This Water again. Some of my favorite books are up here. Students engage with these and it just adds that next piece of taking this outside the science classroom and pulling it into that ELA. Also, I just wanted to kind of go back to what Marnie said with the writing. I actually, when I taught high school, FLVS, there was a piece where I would have them, part of their discussion was to pretend that they're a drop of water and where would they go through the water cycle. So even taking that writing, having them talk about it, so important. And some of my students, when they found out they were in, for example, ocean all the time, I remember one of my students going, I never left ocean, this isn't fun, I just keep rolling ocean. But it was rich when she made the connections. So I'm turning it back to you, Marnie.
All right, so we can turn back over to Jessica.
Well, that was great. So thanks so much, Janet and Marnie, and I hope everybody enjoyed their journey as a water molecule. As Janet and Marnie mentioned, in every PLT activity, there is a reading connections section where suggested books are provided for you. So that's great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to they're going to be pretty brief, about 5 minutes, discussing ideas and adaptations that you might use with these two activities that you've experienced. So we all need trees and water wonders. So what I'm going to do, if you've not experienced being in a Zoom breakout room before, what's going to happen is all of a sudden you're going to be transported into a room with a facilitator, and you'll spend about 5 minutes thinking about some of these ideas, and then I will bring you back to the main room and we'll share some key takeaways, and then we're going to do 2 more PLT activities. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and send everybody off into breakout rooms. And you will see a message pop up that you've been invited, and you'll just need to accept the invitation. So maybe we could start with Kirsten. Now you're
sorry, did you say me to start with?
Yeah, that would be great.
So we talked about using in the primary, using pictures to go with the World of Water or Water Wonders, and big rubber dice that would be quieter to roll and easier to roll. And if they had to go virtual, the children could have their own dice just at home, or you could use a digital dice from one of these websites. And having if you were virtual, you could have the water cycle diagram and the kids move their marker to where they are on the diagram. And for the We All Need Trees, they all liked the activity of having the pictures on their back and asking questions. And Caitlin also mentioned having products they could pull out of a bag to decide if they came from a tree or not.
Great ideas. Yeah, and earlier in the chat, I saw that Marianne mentioned with younger students the idea of a box with pictures on it for the Water Wonders for instead of a dice. It's a little bit more helpful for younger ages. Plus, there's a less concern about flying dice around the room. So great ideas. Thanks for sharing. How about Janet's group?
So we had a variety of different levels. We had high school, we had elementary, stay at home. And one of the things for high school, we said adding more of the rich vocabulary to kind of bump up the level a little bit for them, getting them to do more of the writing pieces, but also how important it is for our high school students to get up and move and engage. For the elementary, same thing. We said, that moving is important. One thing I thought was really interesting is we said making a game. The kids could create a game, and we're adding that engineering piece at that point for no matter what level, elementary, high school, or in between, where they're engaging in a true STEM activity. With the tree hike, I thought it was really cool. We said that you could walk around your schoolyard and take it and identify the trees and kind of learn your schoolyard a little bit more as you're doing a tree hike on your property. So I thought that was good. For virtual learning, we said it's really important to keep that hands-on piece, but it's also a struggle. So some strategies we had was trying to get the kids outside in their own backyard if they're not able to, looking through a window, but also using what we can find online and trying to find those virtual opportunities, kind of like we saw the Orlando, the UCF Arboretum. We could actually take something like that and engage students at home.
That's great. Yeah, and there is a PLT. Speaking of exploring your school grounds or your nature center grounds, there's a PLT activity called Adopt a Tree, where you can actually engage them and picking a specific tree and adopting it and tracking progress and growth over time. So that's another great one. So thanks. How about Dawn's group?
So we had a couple of good takeaways. One of the things that my group was thinking of modification wise is, if we're still going through this COVID-19 in a while, and I had a group of non-formal educators, so they work with all different levels, that for the Water Wonders, you could have the students carry their own dice so that, they're not contaminating each other's, and that it might be easier to do this activity by having them stay apart at the stations. Another thing that was mentioned, maybe to make it a little more fun and engaging, is to have them act out what's happening to them in Water Wonders. And then when we talked about We All Need Trees, some of the great ideas we came up with was you can have the older kids research a certain item. And you can also have them maybe compare and contrast synthetic versus natural items too, from the trees. They also said that another way to do it virtually is you could still lay all the products out on the table and show it with, your phone screen or something like that. Have the students take maybe 5 minutes to get a few things around their house and lay them out that they think is from tree products, and almost turn it into a game where you give them points or something for tree products versus a non-tree product. So.
Great, awesome ideas. How about Sue's group?
So we really— Sue wasn't on with us, so I'm sorry. I thought you were with me. Never mind, I'm going away.
Thanks, Karen. So my group was really non-formal educators, And we really focused on the modifications and the diversity of this particular activity and taking it way out of the box, which was awesome. So some of the ideas we came up with was looking at more biochemical cycles. So nitrogen and phosphate and leachate is so important, at least in my line of work, and algae blooms and things that really relate to us specifically in the work that we do. And then maybe kind of tweaking the activity a little bit and saying, okay, I am a harmful pesticide, and changing it up on the cycle, and when you roll, what would happen to that harmful pesticide to the environment as you rolled in different water features. So then the other thing we talked about, making it just a little bit more virtual, because this activity was just presented awesome, was maybe to use that virtual whiteboard. And so you could show a visual of actually walking yourself through the water cycle. Just something else to tweak it a little.
Great. Great ideas. And last but not least, Karen's group.
Okay, sorry about that walk over to that last group. So a lot of the same things that had been mentioned, we did stay with the water cycle conversation, and the use of the larger box-like die for the younger students is great and appropriate. The adaptation into turning it into something very usable for your specific purpose, as Erin had shared regarding marine organisms and how they go through their life cycles. So they can still have these journey stations, but applied to the marine system that they were referring to. So lots of adaptations with color coding the stations, the use of the dye, and some of the other things that others have said without repetition. So.
Wonderful. It just shows how adaptable PLT activities are. The way they're in the book is almost never how we do them, or how we do them in a training or in a classroom or a nature center setting. So just be thinking about all those different extensions and adaptations. So right now we're going to shift back into some PLT activities. First, we're going to, Dawn Perez is going to lead us through tree cookies activity. So we're going to be learning about tree growth and how to tell the life of a tree, the life story of a tree. So I'll turn it.
All right, thank you very much, Jessica. Oh, let me do this. Okay, can you all see my screen? Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so like Jessica said before, what we're going to be doing is the tree cookies activity, which is number 76 in the guide. And this is what the intro looks like. And some of the objectives, participants will be introduced to and virtually examine cross sections of trees. They'll infer from a tree's rings what environmental conditions might have occurred in its life. And they'll also be able to correlate the time it takes a tree to grow with events in human history and in their own personal history. So first of all, what is a tree cookie, right? If some of you are not familiar, a tree cookie is actually a cross section of either a fallen tree's branch or trunk. It's about 1 to 2 inches thick. And so this cross section is cut. And as you can see here, it has different parts of the tree cookie here. So starting from the inside, you have the heartwood, which gives support and strength to that tree. The heartwood's very important. If the heartwood is to be caught in a fire or was to be damaged, you know, that tree might not survive. Then you have the xylem, which carries water from the roots to the leaves. You have the cambium, which is the growing layer that builds the cells. You have the phloem, which carries nutrients from the leaves to the cambium. And then you have the outer bark, which protects the tree. Now, for those of you that teach elementary, you might only want to focus on maybe the heartwood and the outer bark, whereas for older grades, middle school and high school, you can really go into the details of these different parts. And you can also tie in photosynthesis and that whole process with this activity as well. So here you'll also see that there are growth rings, and a dark and a light growth ring actually equal 1 year of growth. So the lighter wood is going to be that spring wood, usually when you're getting the rain and the nutrients, and then the dark wood is going to be the summer wood, which would typically be the drier times of the year. So the spring wood and the summer wood together would make 1 year for that tree's life. So we can tell from tree cookies how old the tree is by counting those rings. We can also tell if something happened that was traumatic or caused a scar to this tree. So if you look here, G, you see that dark area here, that tree went through a fire. So that is a scar from fire. In B, you'll notice this little dark area here outside of the heartwood. That would be a dead branch. You also might notice some dots, or maybe it looks a little more porous. That could be something like a disease or an insect that got to that tree. And if the rings are closer together, typically that means that there wasn't enough rain or nutrients. So you can tell that maybe there was a drought, or again, some kind of insect infestation. So we're going to focus on this one. Again, you can see that scar there is probably where there was a dead branch. And since you can see the rings so well in this one, I'm going to count the rings together with you of this tree cookie to figure out how old this tree is. Now, personally, I like to count the dark rings because I just think they're easier to see. So here we go. We're going to count. So we have the heartwood there, and then it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So this tree is probably somewhere between 16 to 18 years old. And when you do this with students, you can give them a magnifying glass and have them look in even more detail at the tree cookie. Here's another example of a tree cookie. You can notice again 2 dead branches here. This is from an eastern red cedar, and you'll notice that the rings look a lot different in this tree. And this is another tree cookie with another scar, probably again another dead tree branch, but we also have this spotting down here. So who knows, that could be maybe fungus or some kind of infestation. So here's an example of doing a tree cookie investigation in a first grade classroom. I typically use this for elementary school students when they come out to our site, and they do the same thing that they do here. They use those magnifying glasses to look closer at the heartwood, at the outer bark, to look and count the tree rings. And so here are the student pages. So if you didn't have a tree cookie or you weren't able to get one, they do have a student page that shows a tree cookie with tree rings, and it shows a scar from a dead branch. So you can always have the students count the rings on this student page. And then they have a page that lists the different parts of that tree cookie. And again, for the older students, you can have them focus on each part and kind of maybe do research, learn about photosynthesis and tie that all in. With the younger students, I typically just focus again on the heartwood and the outer bark. And then below that, they have different examples of tree cookies that have had different things happen to them. So in number 6, again, that's a dead branch. In number 7, it's pointing out that the rings are very close in that one area, which could either be drought or due to insects. And then in 8, that is a scar from a fire. So one of the variations that I like to do with this is to create my life as a tree cookie. So in the book, there's three parts rather. You do the cookie counting, and then you can actually, to tie in language arts, you could have the students write about their tree cookie and what happened to their tree. But then the third part, or the variation, is my life as a tree cookie. And so here you see I have grabbed a white paper plate and I have turned it into a tree cookie. So I have my outer bark on the ridges of that paper plate. I've got my cambium here, and then I have my heartwood. And so then I'm going to draw the rings of my life, right? How many years I am. Now, for some of us that are a little bit older, it might be hard to fit all of your tree rings onto one plate. So I've done it in fives. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, I'm almost 35. And you'll notice that I've then marked my plate with different events. So over here at 10 years old, I have a little scar because I sprained my ankle while I was jump roping. You'll notice in the 18 to 20 range, I have another scar there. That's because I had the chicken pox when I was 18 and I tore my ACL when I was 19. And then in my early 20s, I had something else happen. Now I just decided to focus on scars, but you can also focus on positive things. For instance, I could draw a heart on my 20th ring when I first got my first kitten, things like that. And so this is great for social emotional learning. So what we're gonna do now, if Jessica could help me out, is if anybody wants to share some of their My Life as a Tree cookie and kind of maybe share 3 events that you have represented on your tree cookie.
Yeah, so if you had a chance to draw your tree cookie, your life as a tree cookie before today's webinar and you would like to share, you can turn on your video and your microphone and let me know by raising your hand or in the chat box that you'd like to share.
Should I stop sharing my screen, Jessica, so we can see?
Sure, yeah.
For a second, okay.
See everybody a little better.
Yeah, so if you guys want to enable your videos and maybe raise your hand or kind of hold up your tree cookie, and if you want to talk about it, you can talk about it. So I see Kim. Kim's holding up hers. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your tree cookie?
I certainly would. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I actually stopped at year 30 because I ran out of space.
Yeah.
But here.
Uh-oh. Something happened to your audio, Kim.
Yeah, she's still unmuted, but for some reason it's not coming through.
Oh, I like the little footprint. Do your footprints, are those your kids? Oh, I feel so bad because she's going into so much detail.
I sent a note in the chat, but.
Okay. So
Sorry,
Kim, we had a little bit of a hard time hearing you. But nice job on your tree cookie. I really liked it. And I'm assuming that the little feet meant her kids. So that's really cute. I like that addition. Does anybody else want to share their life as a tree cookie? Hi, Marianne. Do you want to share? All right, go ahead and unmute yourself real quick. There you go.
All right, so here's mine. And this right here, this big scar, last year I had both my knees replaced. And a many month recovery. So it's a very large scar. This little heart right here, 2 years ago, I got married. So that's my special, special day. And this one right here was, I got a bruise on my leg the other day. So I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to stick that little tiny in there just for fun.
I love it. And I love the heart for the being married. That's very cute. Thank you for sharing. Just so y'all notice, Marianne used a plate, but Kim used a piece of paper. So you can also use a piece of paper and I take a bowl and draw around it. Okay, so those are two different ways that you can create tree cookies. Do we have maybe one more person that would like to share before we move on? Anyone? Any takers? Hi, Jean.
Hi. I'll go ahead and go. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see if you can see this. Might not be able to see.
Green screen. There you go.
Okay. So I have on here.
Oh, you're muted again. Hold on. Oh, I can't unmute you. Okay, there you go.
Should be unmuted again. So
there you go.
I did it in 5-year increments. So have my little heart area there starting off. And I did when I was about 9 years of age, I fell and injured broke my humerus bone. So I've got a little mark on there. And then continuing out, I have a larger growth ring when I was doing, like when I was in high school and then going into college. I feel like I grew a lot as a person and learning a lot. And then later on down, when I was, we started our company about, I guess it's been a little bit over 10 years ago. And so I've got a larger growth ring with that. And just feel like, again, growing a lot as a person and professionally and everything. So I put kind of my growth rings along that.
I like that. That's a good idea. You can do it growth both mentally and physically. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you for sharing, guys. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So just one more slide here, some literacy connections. So throughout the book, you'll notice, as Jessica and the other facilitators have said, that there's different enrichment and literacy connections. So here are 3 stories that you could connect to this activity. Of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with the giving tree, but also outside and inside trees, and then circle unbroken, the story of a basket and its people. Another really interesting enrichment activity is maybe to invite a forester to come out and talk to your group too about what they do, how they manage the forest, and things like that. So that's about it. Does anybody have any questions about this activity? Oh, by the way, this is where you can get tree cookies. If anybody's wondering, you can ask your local forester, you can purchase them online, and also in the book, they talk about how to make your own as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dawn. And so we're going to dive right into our last activity. We're a little crunched for time, so we likely are going to run over a few minutes. And so I fully understand if you need to step away at 12, but if you can stick around with us, I really encourage you to do so, because this last activity, Web of Life, is a really great activity, and Karen and Sue are going to lead us through that.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, everybody can see that, I hope, and hear me all right. So today we're going to be talking about the Web of Life, which is activity 45 in the guide. And I just wanted you, I'm sorry. Okay. I just wanted you to take a look at the green box up on the top, or the green bar, because that's where you're going to get a brief lesson or summary of the lesson, each lesson, which is a really helpful tool when you're looking for something in a quick manner. And so the objective of this lesson is to understand that ecosystems are definitely made up of interdependent organisms and other components. And one of the really important things in your background knowledge, of course, is vocabulary. And so we've listed some of the vocabulary words that are also found for you in the guide. The only two that we put in for the upper grades that aren't in the guide, and they are in italics, which would be the biotic and abiotic vocabulary words. So just an important part of the activity is that they have that background knowledge of their vocabulary. So at this point, we're going to engage our brains, and this would be our engagement piece. And just think for a minute, look at this cute little tree. Dana, I'm thinking of you when I look at this right here. But take a look at this picture for a moment and just think about what kind of components do we need to have a healthy forest. So go ahead and unmute yourself. You can shout out. I personally cannot see the chat, so if anyone could read the chat for me, that would be great, just so we get some ideas of that would help us with this slide. Basic look.
I got you. I'll help you with the chat.
Thanks, Karen.
Sunshine.
Good one.
Water.
Water, thank you, yes.
Producers, consumers, and decomposers. Thank you, Lisa. Plants and animals, Janet.
Awesome. Good. So definitely those things that you suggested and more, these would be kind of your go-tos or what you would really be looking for. And again, looking and assessing either formally or informally prior knowledge and how exactly you want to take this. So now we're going to think about a moment. We're going to dive a little bit deeper, and I'm going to turn it over to Karen. But think about a specific ecosystem, and today we're going to look at the pine flatwood ecosystem. What would be some things that you might find that you need to have a healthy pine flatwood ecosystem? Go ahead, Karen, I'm going to mute.
So on this one, thank you, Brian. That last comment I saw was fire. And for this specific ecosystem, fire would be pretty important. So those things that you list are going to be different for every area. The photo here is specifically of a type of flatwood. And I would like you to get that chat right in the front of you, get ready to type. And beyond the components, let's look specifically of what would be found in this ecosystem. And if you're not familiar with this one, just look at the picture and name some of the things that you see there to continue to engage this process of thinking of what an ecosystem might contain. Okay, go for tortoises, saw palmettos. Great start. Let's keep it going. Pines, sandy soil, great. One of our abiotics. Birds, thank you, Marianne. We can't see them, but we know they're going to be there. Wildflowers, good air quality, bugs. Excellent. So some of the things that you named are on, whoops, go ahead, are on this next slide. You're still naming grass and rat snakes. So these are some of the things that are found in your pine flatwood ecosystem. And some of those vocabulary words that we want to make sure the students understand would be applied in this part of the activity. When you're doing an e-learning lesson, you could do it in this method, and I'm just going to kind of step through it, but I would like you to consider before we go on to the next slide. There's one abiotic factor listed in this word bank. And with that pause, I'm sure you all found it. Yes, thank you, Kim. It is the sun. So in an ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem, animals and plants are interdependent on one another for lots of different reasons. It's not just food webs, but it's also going to be support of shelter, movement of nutrients, pollination, and things like that. But this activity really focuses on that relationship of having a movement of energy through the system. And we all know, and if not, it does start with the sun. So take a couple seconds, start with the sun, and I'd like you to see what would be next in supporting the system, taking the energy from the sun. And you have lots of options. Kim says plant life. So there's multiple things for plants there, and that is correct. So Janet wants to start with wiregrass. Let's all create, write it down on a piece of paper, or I'd like you to put it in that chat. Go from the sun to one of the plants and see how far you can go out by creating a food chain. Go ahead and type your chain in the chat. And make sure you hit send. Okay, thank you, Janet. Excellent, thank you. There we go, I'm seeing them now. Oh, Lisa, to segue into the next, I do like, you ended with a worm. Love it. One of our components that breaks down the items in the soil. So if one of the fox squirrels die, for instance, it may support that worm. Excellent. Let's go on to the next slide. On an e-learning platform, we would be able to have the students, whoops, wrong one. Let's go on to the next one. We'll come back. We would be able to annotate that document with lines. The students could be assigned different colors and they can draw in their arrows. You put it in the chat, they could put it in here using the annotation device. Could be an assignment independently, this could be a group. Go ahead, Sue, if you would. You can then layer all of those food chains and begin to see that the connections are multiples. You've got the yellow rat snake being consumed by the bobcat. You have the raccoon that possibly could be consumed by a bobcat. So there are shared relationships here. This is taking us into that idea of an actual food web. Okay, Sue. So another option, they can independently create food chains. The left side picture are in color so that you can see this, but they're all starting with the sun in the yellow, and there's an orange chain, pink, the white one is the longest. Each individual could create their own chain, and then those chains are connected with the sun, and then other connections like our yellow rat snake and raccoon to the bobcat could be made. It kind of gets a little messy when you start putting those paper chains together. Okay.
Do we want to go back to the, I don't know why that came out of order there, but I want to go back to this and then that other one real quick.
Yes.
Don't know what happened there, but anyway, so at some point after you have really worked, as Karen said, on the food chain, you want each of the students to pick a specific organism. And in this case, these were 3rd or 4th grade students, so it was a little bit more basic, and it was yet a different ecosystem. It was the scrub. But they take ownership of this organism, and they begin to do some research. Now, obviously, this is something that would have to be guided, and there are some really fantastic questions that help you with the research in the guide. Some of them are, where within the forest does your organism live? What does it eat, and what eats them? Very important. what other organisms live with them in the forest, and how does this animal depend on them, and how does the animal influence its environment? So again, really enforcing that interconnectedness that Karen was referring to. And then what I had this group of kids do is, because they had to share their research, they were to take 2 or 3 of what they thought were the most important facts about that organism and how its interdependence works, and put it on the back of the picture. And again, it could be an assessment. So Karen, let's just talk about that one real quick.
Yeah, so you may not be comfortable with what's in your habitat. You can create your own cards for sure, the marine ecosystem, the coastal ecosystem, swamps, whatever you'd like. But this one is specifically for pine flatwood. You'll be provided this resource. The top left picture shows 2 organisms found in that ecosystem. The back of the card will have the information on it. An earlier activity with tree cookies was set up similarly. So these could be provided for the students. I used the brainstorming for you to share what you might be familiar in this ecosystem with, but these cards could also be used, and you could assign them to your students to focus on, with or without the information on the back. As a middle school teacher currently, I felt that a resource to provide to my students as well as my teachers that may be learning themselves about this concept would be helpful. So the connections, some of the connections will be found on this other resource, the bottom right table, and it progresses you through the different levels of energy transfer, not in a perfect sense, but the abiotic factors are listed that would impact these organisms. And then it goes into the different trophic levels, those energy transfer levels. So your sun would then provide the energy for the producers, and then all of your consumers are listed there as they increase in levels. So that might be helpful for you in doing this activity. I hope that it will be. And we'll skip those.
Yes, I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. But
and then we end up right here. So visually, basically this activity is the kids going from researching to then an engaging interactive activity of creating their own food webs. But the food chains could be taken to lay out in a photo opportunity, much like the other visuals were. So you can start seeing that webbing going on. Okay, Sue, to end it.
So we're going to be watching just a brief video, and Jessica, I think you're going to have to help me again with this, of what this really looks like in action. So after all of our pieces are done and they've done their research and they have their picture of their organism, we're going to just watch this brief video. And I think, Jess, you have to pull it up for me. I don't know why I can't.
Yeah, so, yep, I just pulled it up. Can everybody see the screen now? And I'll start the video.
Yes, we can.
Okay, here we go.
You bring your card up, and we're going to sit in a big circle here in the front. So come on up with your planter animal card. Okay, so everybody sit showing your card like this. Hold up your card so other people can see it. And we have a variety of plants and animals here. I see rabbit, grass, fox, sun, hawk, mouse, squirrel, bear, some leaves, a chipmunk. I have a ball of yarn here, and you've got cards with plants and animals and the sun. How do you think we can model a web of life? Anybody have any ideas? You're first, go ahead.
We can use the red string to connect it like a food chain.
Right, she said we can use the red yarn to connect things that the energy flows from one to the other. What does everything start with? The sun. Say that really loud. The sun. The sun. That's right. We're going to start with the sun. So I'm going to give the end of the string to Kevin here with the sun. And then Okay, so we talked about something that needs light to make its energy, to get its food. What should this go to next? All right, let's take it from the grass because the leaves also need the sun. Do we have any other plants? Where are our herbivores? Over to the grasshopper. What might eat a rabbit? What might eat a mouse? Hawk? Yes. Is this starting to look like a spider web?
Yes.
Yes.
Right here.
Yes, definitely. We have our web of life. And I want you to all hold your string a little bit tight right now. Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm going to give it a little tug. And if you can feel the tug, you tug. And we'll see who else feels the tug. When we gently tug and you feel the tug go through the food web, that shows how all of the plants and animals in the forest are interconnected and dependent on each other. What happens if one of our animals doesn't exist in the forest anymore? What happens if the squirrel doesn't exist? Go ahead and drop off. If you're a squirrel, let go of the yarn. So what about the animals that eat the squirrel, like the fox? So the fox has to let go of the yarn because you're dependent, you're eating that. What about our hawk who likes to eat squirrels? Kevin, could you repeat what you said? Nice and loud.
Each animal depends on the other.
Each animal depends on the other. That's right. It's all interconnected in our web of life. So just a final question to wrap up. We're going to talk a little bit about biodiversity. Anybody know what biodiversity means?
Biodiversity means different types of life.
Right. Right. Bio meaning life. It's a different types of life in a forest. So if you have a lot of biodiversity, you've got a lot of different types of plants and animals in the forest. And if you have low biodiversity, then there might only be a few different types of plants and animals. Like say there was only oak trees in the forest and only deer, squirrel, mice, and hawks. So if something happens to the mice in the forest, would that have a big effect on the forest or a little effect? Right, so the fewer species there are, the bigger the negative effect. So it's good to have a lot of biodiversity or high biodiversity. So really good job today with that activity.
Thank you for that. And as you can see, the build-up, the organization of the concepts culminate in this amazing hands-on activity that will demonstrate these relationships within the ecosystems.
And that's it. I guess we'll wrap it up.
Wonderful. So thanks so much to Karen and Sue. And we were originally planning to do a breakout discussion again now for tree cookies and web of life, but in the interest of time, just thought I'd keep everybody together as a group. And if you have any ideas for adaptations or extensions for either of the activities or ways that you might use the activity, go ahead and either turn on your microphone and share or use the chat feature to let us know. So the National PLT site is a very important site to keep in your back pocket. PLT.org is the address. You are going to access the online course, which is part 2 of the training. You will create a login on this site. So that step will already be done for you. As you see, I already have my login up here, but you would click here on PLT workshop information. You're going to create your login. And just wanted to show you some resources available to you. There are a few free curriculum resources available. When you take the online course, you will be receiving access to the pre-K through 8 ebook. And when you fill out the evaluation for this training, you'll have an option to provide your mailing address if you'd like to receive a hard copy version of the guide. There are free curriculum resources available that are fully downloadable online. So you will be able to access those from your account. Resources for PLT lessons. So every activity that we did today, as well as every other activity in this guide, has a web page on the PLT site. So for example, if we go to Web of Life You have some connections here. If you're looking for some STEM strategies, there's a section that provides some STEM connections, some additional reading connections, and other resources like how to create a 4-minute video on how to create a food web, on a podcast series, and all kinds of online resources available. So I just encourage you that when you are doing a activity from the guide, to just check out this page. If there are student pages associated with the guide, like the water cycle scorecard for Water Wonders or the Tree Cookies student pages, those are available as downloadable PDFs on this website. So you don't have to bother trying to copy them or print them out of the guide. So just make sure you keep those resources in mind. I will be sending you detailed instructions on how to access the online course, and you're going to be receiving an email from information@plt.org with an access code that's specific to you. So be on the lookout for those emails this afternoon. If you are a formal K-8 classroom teacher, oh, real quick, one thing I also wanted to mention is that if you are, I know we have a few secondary teachers, high school age teachers on as well. There are a few free curriculum resources for high school available, the Teaching with iTree, Southeastern Forests and Climate Change. But in addition, there are a number of secondary modules that are available from PLT. So please be sure to check those out. If you are a formal K-8 classroom teacher, we, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, have 5 of the PLT curriculum guides correlated to Florida standards. So I just wanted to show you how to access that information. If you just go to our website, and I will be sharing a document on Google Drive with all the facilitators' contact information from today, as well as how to keep in touch with Florida PLT and National PLT. If you go to the curriculum page, you'll see a link for standards correlations. And then this training again is focused on the pre-K through 8 activity guide. There's an introduction for how to use the correlations tables, and then they're available in PDF or Excel. And you can download either version, whichever one you prefer to work with, and then find the activity that you're looking for. If you want to search for a specific standard, you can do that as well. And so they're organized by subject, and also have some information on level of activity and the level of complexity. So if you have any questions about those standards correlations, please do contact me. And then I'm just going to pull up a few more slides to close out today's training. So again, with Florida PLT, we have our website. We have an active Facebook page and Twitter. We do an e-newsletter where we send out bi-monthly newsletters. You can sign up for that on our website, National PLT's website and social media pages, and they have an e-newsletter as well. And again, I'll be providing you links to all of this information. So let's recap quickly on our webinar today. We learned about PLT, went on a virtual tree ID hike, experienced activities, discussed and shared ideas for using PLT in your classroom or program, and explored resources available to you. So what's next? As you know, there is a part 2 to this virtual training, and this is a self-paced online training. And you will be getting access to the ebook through this training. I will be sending each of you an access code this afternoon and a document that explains exactly how to insert that access code and create your account at plt.org. There's 4 modules, a little bit more background on PLT and the conceptual framework of the program. You will do 1 more PLT activity, a virtual version of How Big Is Your Tree? You'll do a hike through the guide and learn how to navigate through the guide and use the various indices and appendices. And then you'll do a training action plan and complete the evaluation. And again, with the evaluation, you have an option to provide your physical mailing address, and we can also send you a hard copy of the guide. When you get access to the ebook, when you do the online training, that is password protected, and you'll use the same password that you use to set up your PLT account to open up that PDF. And then once you finish the online course, you'll get a certificate. And I am always here to help troubleshoot any issues with the online course, or if you need additional resources related to PLT. Again, I will be sending a link to Google Drive with a lot of the different resources that the facilitators mentioned and showed you today. So I appreciate your staying on for some extra time. I'm sorry that we ran over. I just wanted to go back and look at some of these chat comments. It looks like Kim mentioned that with Web of Life, you could do a bulletin board and have a keystone species disappear and do an investigation to find what the implications would be. That's great. And Kirsten mentioned that there are websites that relate information from tree cookies to historical events. So students could research an event and draw a diagram to illustrate how that event might affect the growth of a tree. And there is another part of the tree cookie activity which provides some guidance on that piece. So that's another great extension. And Karen also mentioned the idea of introducing invasive and or invasive exotic species to the Web of Life and how that affects the ecosystem. Predator-prey relationships and construct graphs for local species. So those are all great ideas. So we are so appreciative of the time that you all have spent with us today and appreciate your staying on a little bit extra with us. And so with that, just be on the lookout for a couple emails one from me this afternoon and one from information@plt.org. And please do not hesitate to contact with me with any questions. And I also want to thank an incredible team of facilitators that have helped make this virtual training possible.
Thank you, everybody.